The US presidential election is being closely watched by countries across the world, and South Africa absolutely being no different. A recent Ipsos poll asked South Africans which way they would vote. More than half said that they'd back the Democratic Party's Joe Biden, while only 1 in 5 said they'd vote for Donald Trump. On the eve of the election, MP Reverend Kenneth Meshoe for the African Christian Democratic Party tweeted his support for Donald Trump and asked his followers to pray for a peaceful election and for Trump to be re-elected. In the 2016 US poll, around 81% of Christian evangelicals voted for Trump and just 16% voted for Hillary Clinton. For more on this now, let's bring in the Reverend himself, Kenneth Meshoe, joining us now via our Skype line live in Johannesburg. Rev, great to have you on. Thanks very much for making time to chat to us. Your tweets certainly sparked a charged conversation, and that's putting it mildly. Let me start by gauging your response to the responses you received. Were you at all surprised?
Well, it is too early to call. I'm not surprised, because if you remember what happened in 2016 when he ran against Hillary Clinton, she was way ahead, and all predictions were stating that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then things turned around to the 11th hour. So because of the experience of 2016, that can be repeated again. So it's too early to call.
Do you want to take another jab at that question, Rev? I'm asking, were you surprised at the responses you got to a tweet you put out, essentially calling some of your followers to pray for Donald Trump and for him to be re-elected? I'm asking this because, of course, there was a lot of backlash, people saying they're disappointed that you'd support an individual like Donald Trump.
Well, I was not surprised. It was expected, but I thought it is important for me to voice out what I felt. I know many people are scared to do something like that, but I'm personally not scared to stand for my convictions. Even if I'm the only one, I'm not scared to stand for my convictions. So I was not surprised at the reaction, because the majority of people in any way are liberal, and what do you expect from the liberals when somebody says, I'm praying for a conservative to win, or a person they don't like to win, all right? Yeah. So I was not surprised.
And I guess the obvious question then becomes, in what ways does an individual like Donald Trump stand for the teachings that you stand for, the convictions that you speak so proudly of now? How does his policies, what he stood for, what he said, align with the Christian way of life, so to speak?
Well, there are a few things, maybe 1 or 2 things I can mention about his stance. He respects human life from the moment of birth. Now, you know that in the US, they have partial birth abortion, which is one of the most cruel things that can be done to a baby, that one part of the body of the baby is already outside, that an instrument can be used piercing the back of the neck of the baby and then sucking the brains out or killing the baby when the baby is already out. That's why it's called partial, because the baby is almost out. So I think that is cruel, and personally, I believe life starts at the moment of conception, as the scriptures teach. So that's something that he also holds on to. That's something that he also believes. And on this one, we are definitely together. And secondly, he believes also in the natural family, a family consisting of father, mother, and children. And that's exactly what I believe myself. And maybe lastly, let me mention something that is not known, but that is still going to be known, and that's going to be very controversial, which is the Great Reset. People must Google, they must search, they must research, okay? Because when we talk about the Great Reset, we are talking about a policy that is going to drastically limit individual freedoms, particularly those that were in debt, those that could not pay for their mortgage bonds. And then they will say, the powers that be, the elite will say, we are going to forgive you. The banks are going, we are going to forgive you for all the debts you cannot honor, but we are going to own your house, you're going to own your car and everything that you cannot bend, and you're going to get what they call a universal basic income. And obviously that is going to undermine drastically the freedoms of people.
All right, and that's something that is still in the works, so to speak. I understand it is in part something that was endorsed by the World Economic Forum, but there isn't necessarily much detail about what it's going to look like. Let me ask you this, though. In spite of those policies you've just outlined, this is also an individual who's referred to developing nations, which you and I call home, as whole countries. He's an individual who's been heard as saying that he'd grab women by the whatnot. Are you sure this is the type of individual you want to align yourself with, given the role that you play in our communities?
You know, there is nothing to smile about when it comes to his moral positions from his statements, because there are many times he speaks like he did not think before he spoke. I don't agree with that. And any right-thinking person cannot endorse that. But at the same time, when you look at poverty and you look at how the man managed to reduce the unemployment rate of black people from 8.4% in 2016 to 5.8%, life is about jobs. Life is about getting something to live on. And the man did well with the economy. So I'm considering the economy and saying the man's, nobody doubts that he was good with the economy. So are you going to say because the man does not speak well, because the man's mouth is not clean, and yet he's able to help people get jobs, are you going to say don't support that man, while you can challenge him and engage him on how he speaks, on how he relates to people, that if he does not show respect to individuals and to other race groups, definitely that is bad. Nobody can support that. But I thought more about, in my own country, people are not clean. In my own country, the morals, if you talk about the morals in leadership, you will be embarrassed if you start talking about what's happening in South Africa. But we want to have a situation where people get jobs, particularly people of our color, because the more people get jobs, the more people are employed, the lesser you're going to have criminal activities. So I'm hoping that people would understand the importance of the economy in choosing a leader or a president for the country.
Yeah, it's interesting you specifically say that, Reverend. What happened to the teaching that man does not live on bread alone? I put it to you that being able to be presidential is as important as being able to run an economy well. Surely there needs to be an appreciation of that complex, and if we were to take that into consideration, many people argue that a President Donald Trump's second term is likely to cause more global political upheaval than, the potential benefits to the economy of places like the United States, which in of itself is very anti-globalization.
The fact is, I agree with charity beginning at home. I am a family man who knows men and husbands who look more after their girlfriends and mistresses more than their own children and their own families. I say start at home. For him and for any country to compete globally, they have to ensure that they have a strong economy themselves. We are talking about the global economy. But the fact is, where is one going to be in the race for leadership in that global economy? Is he going to follow those who are leading because they have stronger economies? Or should he work harder to ensure that he is among those whose economies are strong? Because then you can make a meaningful contribution. If your economy is not strong enough, you cannot make a meaningful contribution. You will have to listen to those with strong economies. So I agree that globalization is the way to go, but to make a meaningful contribution, start at home, build your own economy so that the economy can be strong. Why is African governments not listen to much when it comes to the economic forums? Is because they have poor economies. They don't take them seriously many times, because they know that many African leaders go to world forums to go and see who can give them loans, who can support them, who can sponsor their programs, and so on. So when a man says, I want to build my economy, my country first, so that when I get on the table with other leaders, I will have a stronger economy so that it would give me an advantage, I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Okay. Before I let you go, Reverend, very quickly, given that point, South Africa is approaching its general elections pretty soon. In fact, local government elections are next year. Are you then saying that you're willing to back a candidate with questionable moral standing, but who's able nonetheless to fix the South African economy. Is that essentially the paradigm in which you're working when considering how to actually support any candidate who's running for president?
Well, let me say not necessarily. You know, I've heard people say, we like the Rev, but he's a good, strong, moral person. But we want to ensure that whoever leads us is going to ensure that we have a strong economy. People will say, okay, we go for Cyril Ramaphosa, he's a businessman, the man understands economy, so he will do better. But not the one who's have a better moral stand. So I do not necessarily say when it comes to South Africa, I will do that. But I'm going to look at, in South Africa, fortunately, we are not just voting for a president, but we are voting for a political party. So there are many dynamics that one will have to look into before one makes a decision. But when it comes to America specifically, because they choose a president, and you have had crime the highest amongst black people. You go to prisons, who are the most there? The most are black people. They are high in number. Criminals are more black than other race groups. And when you ask the question, they say it's because of poverty. The guys don't have jobs. Now, as a black man, I don't rejoice when I hear that most criminals are black and it's because of poverty, because of lack of jobs. So if there can be anybody who can help them get jobs, I would support that person so that the number of criminals that are labeled black would also be reduced. Besides them putting food on the tables for their families, at least the number of black people who are accused of being criminals are being reduced because these people now have jobs. I say I'm still saying today, let us help find a person who can help more unemployed people, like black people particularly, to get jobs.
All right. Thanks very much for coming onto the AM report, giving us your take on this important global story. ACDP leader there, Reverend Kenneth Meshoe, might I add, saying essentially he'd back anybody who'd be able to pull the black majority out of the economic doldrums. The question becomes, though, at what cost? Well, we'll continue watching the situation unfold in the U.S. and give you that transnational perspective.